Yaakov Avinu lo meis. Yaakov, our forefather, did not die, says Rabbi Yochanan in the Talmud, in Tractate Tanit, which our friend Elisha just finished learning, along with many other. Now, the Talmud discusses this and says, how could this be? In this week's Torah portion, Parshat Vayechi, it talks about Yaakov gathering his sons together, blessing them, and it graphically describes his passing and burial, in which the Egyptians embalmed and buried, and his family and the Egyptians eulogized Yaakov, our forefather Jacob. So how can the Talmud say that Yaakov never died? Yaakov lo met. The Talmud goes on to explain that there is a verse in Jeremiah, in Yirmiyahu, in the scripture, Al tira avdi Yaakov, Al tira avdi Yaakov, Al tira avdi Yaakov. It's a minor attempt at a song that my late grandfather would sing every Saturday night. Al tira avdi Yaakov, fear not, do not be afraid, my servant Yaakov. V'al techas Yisrael, and don't be dismayed, the Jewish people. Ki hineni moshiacha, because I will save you, v'zaracha, and your children. So in the verse it says, God's telling Yaakov, I will save you and your children. And he says, the Gemara extrapolates using one of the methodologies of extrapolation in the Talmud called Hekesh, in which they compare words to each other and the relative symmetry or closeness of the words. And they said, Ma Zaro Bachayim, Afu Bachayim. Just like the pasuk in the Torah says, I will save you and your children. Now his children, his seed, Zaro, are alive. Ma Zaro Bachayim, just like his seed are alive, so too he is alive. Afu Bachayim. So the words of the Gemara are Ma Zaro Bachayim, just like his seed, his children are alive. Afu Bachayim, so too he is alive. That's the Talmud. So, of course, as you can imagine, many commentators discuss this, and not least of which the Rebbe. Our Rebbe many times spoke about this, and in previous running commentaries, which you can see from the previous year, number 69 actually, we expounded upon the main idea where the Rebbe says that the life, the true life of a righteous person, of a tzaddik, is the spirit, the message, the mission. And the body is somewhat like clothing for one of us, for a regular human. So just like a person can shed their clothing without fear or without concern and replace it with a higher level of better clothing, so too when a tzaddik passes on, it just means it's like he's shedding his clothing. The body is not that valuable. That was a previous commentary. Over here, we're going to talk about something else. The Rebbe in 1963, on Yud Shvat, on the 10th day of Shvat, which is the date of the passing of the previous Rebbe, the day on which the Rebbe assumed leadership in 1950 or 1951, the Rebbe spoke about this and says that the words that the Torah uses are always exact and always have a lesson for us. In this, even in the Talmud. So in the Talmud's description or explanation that Yaakov is alive, Yaakov Avinu lo met, Yaakov said, the Talmud says, Ma Zaro Bachayim, Afu Bachayim, just as his Zara, Zara, what does Zara mean? Loosely translated, it means his children, his offspring. The Rebbe says, but it's an uncommon use. If you wanted to say his children, you would say Banav, Yiladav, or most commonly biblically used would be Yotzei Chalatzav, those who come from him. Why does the Torah use Zaro? And not only that, the Rebbe continues and says, it's obvious from the context that it's not just talking about Yaakov's children, his blood relatives, blood descendants, but also it's talking about his followers, his students. If so, it should have said Talmidav, his students, or Chanichav, those who were educated from him. Again, so the Rebbe zeroes in and examines the reason. Why does the Talmud say Ma Zaro Bachayim, Afu Bachayim? Why does it use the word zera, which means seed? Says the Rebbe that the word Zaro has a dual meaning, among other meanings. Over here, the dual meaning that we're referring to here, one is obviously children or offspring. Another one is planting seeds. Zera means a seed. The Rebbe says one of the characteristics of planting is that a person will never plant a seed in order to produce another seed like it. A person will always plant something in order to produce something much, much bigger, better, and greater. The Rebbe says that when Yaakov and the Talmud is telling us Ma Zaro Bachayim, it's telling us a message that Yaakov expected his children to not only be children, but to plant like you plant a seed. The Rebbe quoted the Talmud, in which it says that Chum Adam Zareya Kav, a person will not plant a kav, which is a small measure of an area or a base kav, and expect a kav in return. They will expect a kur or many kur in return. And a kur, I checked this on Wikipedia last night, a kur is about 180 times more than a kav. So the example they give there is of 130 square feet would be a base kur, and 23,500 square feet would be a base kav. 130 square feet would be a base kav versus 23,500 square feet for a base kur. So the Rebbe's saying over here that when Yaakov was planting his children, he was expecting them to grow exponentially and in a compounded way, to continue the growth and not just be themselves, but spread the light. The Rebbe says that a tzaddik, a Rebbe, talking about this on Yud Shvat, the date of the passing of the previous Rebbe, is a nitzutza shel Yaakov Avinu. The acronym for Nasi, the term which we call a Rebbe is a Nasi, which literally means prince, but it's also an acronym for nitzutza shel Yaakov Avinu. It's the spark of Yaakov our father. So too says the Rebbe. Now the Rebbe, just to clarify, the Rebbe was talking about the previous Rebbe, but for all practical purposes, the Rebbe was telling us how to approach our Rebbe. So all this applies, so too from us to our Rebbe. And the Rebbe was saying that when the previous Rebbe would study with somebody, whether it was the highest levels of Kabbalah or Talmud or the Aleph Bet, he didn't expect the person to just know and absorb this information. He expected this person, he was planting a seed, and expected the person to grow this information and expand it at least like a kav in ratio to a kur, 180 times a few, like we do when we plant seeds. And the Rebbe says that this also, this idea of planting where you get an exponential or compounded result. So far we've been talking about just in quantity. And now, said the Rebbe, we see this also in quality. In the quality, the Rebbe said, gave 2 or 3 examples. Interestingly, he says, one might think that because the previous Rebbe passed away, at the time it was 63, and he did pass away in 50, so it was 13 years. So one might expect that as time goes on, the connection and the inspiration from the connection to the previous Rebbe would diminish, would get lower and lesser. Says the Rebbe, that might seem true, but even in the world of vegetation, we see otherwise. We see that it is the simple grains that actually take a shorter time to grow, like the wheats or the barleys, and the higher forms of vegetation, whether it's dates or olives or other fruits, they take years to grow. Said the Rebbe that the longer we are away, the more distanced we are from the inspiration from the passing of the previous Rebbe, the greater and the stronger and the more luxurious the fruit should be, the higher quality the fruit should be. Just like simple fruit and simple produce grows fast versus more high quality produce, which takes a longer time to produce, to grow. Moving on, says the Rebbe also that another uniqueness about our relationship with the inspiration we have from our Rebbe and from Yaakov Avinu, and which is different than that of the vegetation, is that in the vegetation world, it's very limited to its kind and size and standard. If you plant wheat, you will get only wheat. You plant barley, you will get only barley. And if you plant one certain quality, you'll get only that quality. Says the Rebbe, a Jew, by definition, is beyond these boundaries. And he says it in a horizontal way and a vertical way. He says when a Jew connects with others, with other Jews, with Avas Yisrael, with Achdus Yisrael, with true love and unity, then we empower each other to grow in ways that we couldn't alone. And the Rebbe says, so much so that even if a person might naturally, characteristically have a certain mode of operation, but then when he or she unites with others and learns from them and gains from them, they're empowered to work in a different setting or in a different mode of operation. The Rebbe said that our Hasidic masters expect of us to learn and to engage in both the revealed aspects of the Torah, the Nigla, and the Hasidic aspects of the Torah, and in doing acts of kindness in tzedakah, materially, spiritually, and these are all different modes of operation. And he quoted a saying. He says, Masai, somewhere in the Talmud, I'm assuming, he says, Masai yagiu Masai lemasei avosai. When will, a person should say to themselves, when will my deeds reach the deeds of my forefathers, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov? And the Rebbe asks, Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, aside from being related to each other, but they were very different personalities. Avraham was the line of chesed, of kindness. Yitzchak was the theme of Gevurah, the exact opposite of discipline and strength. And Yaakov was a blend of the two, and his thing was Torah. So the Rebbe says, how could God expect of us to operate in such varying different modes? Says the Rebbe, when we unite with others, we connect with others, we get empowered by them. That's horizontally. And vertically, says the Rebbe, we're children of God. And because we are B'nai Melachim, children of God, in some places we're called Melachim, kings. Royalty has a quality that royalty breaks through. Melech, hi, Poretz Geder. Okay, comes to Chabad. Melech Poretz Geder. Royalty, a king, when he goes through a path and there's an obstacle, they break through the obstacles, they break down the walls to get to the path. So too says the Rebbe, a person who has a certain natural tendency for one mode of service, we break through that because we're servants of God, we're children of God, we're royalty, and we get through to the other side, wherever we need to get to. This is the basic idea. Well, in a nutshell, to recap, Ma Zaro Bachayim, Afu Bachayim. Just like his children, his seed, are alive. Why does the Torah use the word zara? Because the seed denotes planting in which we gain an exponential compounded result, and also we are able to expand. Unlike the seeds, we are able to expand vertically and horizontally in our growth. We're able to break through the barriers. God bless you. And the Rebbe also in this talk said, when we do this and we act accordingly, like soldiers who take from the treasures that the Rebbes have given us, and we are empowered by them, like the Rebbe said that Alter Rebbe gave an example of a king's diamond in the crown that was pulverized in order to save his son as a medicine. So too, the Rebbes of Chabad have given these incredible teachings and treasures to us to empower us and to bring Mashiach. And when that will happen, says the Rebbe, we won't need to come to learn, to extract teaching in the Torah, Zaro, Bachayim, that just as his children are alive, so too is he alive. But it'll be, when Mashiach comes, everyone will resurrect, and he will be physically alive, not just spiritually alive. May it happen soon. God bless you. Share. And